Number two, agenda is out on the public. I don't see any public online. Is there any public? There is not. Okay, look at that. We're both on this agenda. Well, you're right. Number three is the consent agenda. So we can AI on it because we don't have anyone. So that we want to just kind of follow for a few minutes or next for we really want to go into your project updates next. We're checking the consent agenda.
Yeah, sorry, give me. I'm just
okay.
Wait, I don't know if Ned can hear us, but I think it should be picking up sound. Ned, can you hear us?
I can't. I can't.
Yes.
So with net on the line, that doesn't constitute again.
Right.
So we want to go into number 4, which is a strategic plan. Then you have the application handout. I'm assuming Ian, you're gonna have
Whatever you want.
let's do that while we wait for another voting member.
Sure. It's good to take a look. There's a few different documents. Everyone know that if we're waiting to hear back from Virginia Housing about this application, we're feeling pretty good about it. I've included both the it's called a consultant report that was basically generated by a chosen consultant who we put out an RHP to, and you'll notice it's not a spectrum. It's her name is Amy Neesonson. I know we've spoken a little bit about experience, but I'm not going to go through her whole background. But if you can just look through it later on. She's extensive work with housing organizations, so we think it was a really good fit. If you take a look at the scope and timeline of the proposal, we feel like it doesn't cover our money. If that's one way to, I don't know if that's what.
Good value.
I think. We feel like this was a lot more concrete, and I've talked to Chris since we made this decision. So it's not as if we're not able to work with them in the future, but we felt like this was a lot more. So it's not only going to be this membership review. I know we've taken over this, but she wears there'll be a fee schedule review, and then a lot of different consultations with staff, potentially other organizations to get sort of this rejigged partnership composition with something we're not always going to talk about every year. So trying to accomplish number goals that are in the strategic plan that were designated to the executive committee. So we're excited. I hope to hear back from Virginia Housing pretty soon. I've got indications from their staff that we're in a good place, but we have not heard anything official. So that's sort of the update for where we're at with this application. And we're going to try, because I know we're behind where we wanted to be. Because the application process was a little more onerous than we wanted it to be. We'll try and get started with Amy, as quick as we can once we hear back from Virginia Housing. So that's
knowing that we haven't started yet. But when do you think the deliverable?
the end of the year.
Do you think it will be before the end of the year?
So once we get started, we can, starting my time will probably my time will be devoted to this. I'll talk a little bit next about the Vista and how that sort of frees up some of my time with the other strategic plan items. But yeah, this is a big work item for me and for staff here. So
any question? Can Ned hear us? Ned, can you hear us? So do we have any questions for the strategic plan update that which is hurry up and wait?
essentially.
Just out of curiosity, in this stage of the strategic planning process, did you bid it out to more than one vendor, and then this is one section?
Yeah, so we defined a procurement procedure, which I think was give it out to 4 organizations. From the Virginia Housing approved organizations, yeah. One of the two proposals, the other was the Spark Mill.
One of the things that I found the strength of this one is a lot of the work that we wanted were included in her fee. And a lot of the other ones we received were additional add-on for those items that would have racked up a little bit more local spending in order to get it done. And then additionally, she's gonna do a board manual, which was not included in anybody else's, which will compile a lot of membership, best practices and something we can use for onboarding and for term memberships. Something a little more formalized that I think is
And
really valuable.
What we're doing is we're applying for a grant to fund this.
Yes.
Yes.
To have a consultant walk through.
That's right, you're out there.
The way those grants work is you have to have this to apply.
Yeah. It's a weird process where you have to basically engage with the consultant pretty extensively to even be able to apply, which makes me think it's kind of pretty easy application, but they know you've done your due diligence, yeah. Anthony.
Sorry.
Oh,
So, any other questions for Ian on the strategic plan? Do we want to go back up to the agenda to get things here, or do you want to do your?
no, that sounds,
Or do you want to segue into your next one?
yeah, I think we should knock that out, yeah.
So let's just take care of a little bit of business here first. So we can go back up to consent agenda. These are the February 22 draft minutes. My hope is everybody had an opportunity to read them. It's gonna be a little, extra minute to close them. We'll do that. Look at that. All in favor? Aye. Did you guys? All right. Thank you. Okay, back
Do you want to vote to have our management meeting so you can vote?
I thought the word was that we couldn't have him vote.
So if you,
Now that you have an in-person
Yeah.
program, you can vote to allow him to participate electronically.
Participate or vote?
If both,
Yes.
if you vote to allow him to, he then is as if he's a fifth.
So do we have a readout on that or is it just a simple motion?
It's just a
Simple
simple motion
motion.
and we have to state where he's participating from and for what reason.
Anybody like to do that?
Where is he in my, I don't know where he is.
He's driving
he's in trans, he's,
and I think he's coming back from Harrisonburg.
yeah,
This is that.
I move that Ned be able to participate and vote while in transit in this meeting.
I second that.
There you go. Look at you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Look at that. They do now official. You don't know any. Is he? Is
On
he?
that, drop out, I'll get back in.
We just volunteered you for everything. Don't worry about it. Oh, got it. Okay, so, AmeriCorps Vista recruitment handout. There's a handout in there, and I believe this is, up to you. Ian.
so, I think we mentioned this, at the RHP meeting, after the summit, but, and prior to this, obviously, but we have, so in December, we heard from Virginia Housing Alliance that we were able to get one of their Vista members. I know that Anthony's used this program for, I know organizations like PHA in our region have used it, to great success. One year is, there's two things. One is that it's like an opportunity listing and then a Vista assignment description. It's basically a job description for what the person will be doing. It's standard to what the AmeriCorps program requires us to do. But what's the totally up? We're using a lot of different websites. So the CNE more locally Engage Virginia, I think, is the statewide organization that does a lot of job listings, Handshake, Indeed, LinkedIn. And what's basically the way it works is the same thing is just VHA and AmeriCorps. You'll go into it and you'll see the sites where they're located and the description, basically the title of the job. You choose a few that you'd like to apply for, knowing that you're interviewing somewhere that you potentially relocate to. You just get screened by the VHA staff and then they send them to us. And so we're kind of spread the net as wide as possible. But at times it's just people making career pivots. So people who have the ability to kind of take a year off from making anything, just they'll make survival money. Sometimes it's folks who are just graduating getting their masters or recently got their JD or something. But this year, and so this person will primarily be working on the toolkit that we've talked about as a part of the strategic plan, as well as some of the communications items. So this person will really be, and they're kind of a little bit with some of the strategic planning stuff, but this person, it would be really their whole position is creating and refining these resources. So they would be starting in August, mid-August, and we have to have a in from the candidates that have applied by the middle of July-ish. So we just heard from someone earlier this week. We're going to set up an interview, so that's exciting. This person will be a full-time staff member. They'll be here 40 hours a week, following our hybrid work schedule. So you'll definitely meet them.
But we can't hire them until we get the money, right?
Well, usually don't come through our payroll. We pay a fee, a site fee to have them, but they're on the payroll through the.
Yeah.
So the one question I had when I read the job description, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but so this is a temporary position, right? I mean, like you're for a year or whatever it is. And it looked like they were doing some things that are that's a body of ongoing work. So what happens when the individual leaves?
Being, I guess, accepted, application was accepted by DHA. We actually have the option to renew our AmeriCorps Vista position up to 3 years. So we don't necessarily be that person, but we have the opportunity to say, okay, this work hasn't been completed yet. That's something that I took advantage of, or actually I did. It might be able to be the same person. I'm like,
Yeah, it can.
Yeah.
Most of them
Yeah.
don't.
yeah,
Yeah, the whole thing is better is ongoing in a way,
Oh, okay.
but it has to be capacity building and very
Right.
clear that it can't be like someone doing a,
Yeah.
quick books and stuff like that. Like it needs to be something that eventually will build a capacity of the organization. And oftentimes they liked projects that had a scope of 1 to 3 years that someone could come in and continue the work of. I think that's part of the application process, is you have to actually like talk about that. We weren't selected, unfortunately, but that they've always liked those longer term. And yeah, I mean, people hope to get hired, and not stay on in the, because you get them away.
yeah,
Well, a lot of our peer planning district commissions, that is a pipeline for staff.
Yeah, it is.
Many vistas have then become planners for them.
yeah. So, depending on, I mean, that's always an option. If there's some other, if we get some grant funding or something to support another full-time staff person, that person obviously is acquainted with the organization, it'd be a good fit, but it's a good fit. Yeah, and once this person starts, I think there'll be, I'm not expecting someone to apply that has like extensive data visualization, research skills. So it'll be, their service term will be like learning what we want and learning even like what this organization is, all the players, like the stakeholders, and the types of information that we want to be able to produce for our region. But it's exciting. I mean, it's always exciting to get new people in, and it's cool that people are applying for our job. So we're looking forward to it.
Any other questions for?
Just around the homelessness aspect, I mean, I know this particular job description doesn't have a lot around homelessness, even though it seems that Virginia Housing is very interested in that. Anyway, I just want to offer, help from me or Bragg, if there is a part of this business work that wants to address homelessness, we're here to help.
I mean, I know that we talked about in one of the data committee meetings that it would be this like dashboard, at least would be the rental housing and then current homelessness statistics. And there's a bunch of people, not our peers, but organizations across the country. I know, like, I think it was Texas that has like a statewide homelessness.
Well, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So basically, as instead of just the pit count, trying to estimate that this person's got enough, we can do estimates, we can do variances.
A lot of the objectives did say affordable housing and homeless.
Yeah.
services. Make sure that we were trying to be broad.
Mhm. Yeah, those are like stock from them, right?
It was really not flexible about like how we were able to make it.
Yeah.
To Because it was like, I didn't have to like write that much, I just had to like carefully write.
Well, it also helped that we have a recently approved strategic plan.
Yeah, so I was able to just go,
Right.
yeah, put things into it. Exactly.
Do another hurry up and wait.
So start, you know, we know into the summer.
Any other questions in reference to the weather? I don't know if they can hear us, but if there's any questions, John. Okay. Let's move on to number 6. Coming, there's another question. Coming back home, that wrap up. Though I think that's staff, but I do want to kick it off real quick. Just happened today, I had multiple requests from folks wanting a copy of the hand tool. One was from Carr. The other one was from, and it's escaping me. I think it was Green County, one of the Green County folks, can't remember. Are we getting any closer to actually creating our own version?
So included within the Vista scope of work, actually, I just attended on yesterday. So Hand is that organization that creates that tool. They have the tool we took a little video of is from their 2.0 toolkit, and they just released their 3.0, and I went to the kickoff. And it's interesting, and I had someone connect to me with the I forget the name of the person. Hand outsources it to an organization that actually builds the platform. And for this 3.0, they actually have expanded it from Metro DC to include Baltimore and the surrounding counties. And they're actually hoping to include Richmond. And then I was like, well, sure, this was we have someone in place engaging directly with that organization, saying like, what do we need to do it? Because even I feel like Ruth, we were talking and you sort of were able to at least identify, or okay, this is the Microsoft or the BI, like the platform that they made it with, you know, so I'm working on that actually, because I think that will be something that I want this person to do, but for the most part, I still think it tells a story.
So as a reminder, that was the tool where you split across by the amount of money that you made, it either dropped folks out or folks in, and I just remember it was actually Moselle Booker about county experts this morning to help explain to our board supervisors, you know, where the cost of housing removed certain jobs and positions within our county. Just to stay on that for a minute, the one that we have, did you just by any chance double check to make sure that, because we think their numbers are about the same as our numbers, right? So is there any harm in handing that out to these two individuals that actually?
I mean, I think we're understanding that it's not based directly on this, but the message we're in a high income area that the high AMI is affecting localities that aren't, you know, high income localities. So I think it's still, it says the same thing, I think. And that.
If it's okay with you, I'm gonna have them connect with you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to.
So I'm sorry, I want to kick it off.
No worries. And then we, in terms of how much money we raised, how much money we spent, and who attended the event. And I mean, just $100 was how much we spent. I mean, I know that's not exactly right.
48-44.
It's almost $50,000, and if AV was a little less expensive, we would have made some money. But the ticket sales, we did about $5,600 in ticket sales, and then we got some tickets purchased, and just look at the list of organizations that attended. There's a ton of organizations I hadn't even heard of, which was cool. Like either organizations, some of the outfits that I didn't. Really happy with the variety of, especially in Charlottesville, the variety of different departments that attended. So you had like DSS, neighborhood services, community development, office of housing. Obviously, those are supervisors and city council members in those cases, but So I want to kind of give us an opportunity to reflect on just kind of not pat ourselves on the back, but really, look at some of, we have town Farmville, people, other organizations and other parts of the state coming to this event. And I know I've talked to Keith about this briefly, folks from other planning districts are reaching out to me saying, hey, we want to start our own partnership and have our own summit. In fact, I know for a fact that two other planning districts are trying to host some sort of housing related event, maybe not this big, but at the end of this year. So I'm excited to kind of, I don't know, not establish ourselves, but sort of, yeah.
One of them, I told them they're welcome to any of our planning type.
Yeah.
Our checklists and our timelines and anything that we can do to support them doing this in other.
For sure.
places. They said, happy to hand it over.
Yeah, but then we don't take any responses from the information, but people. The documents that people liked the most, that was kind of interesting. It's true.
Which button the room is not.
But there was only one person in the meeting.
Yes. Meeting and kind of, yeah, give you guys an opportunity to reflect on it and.
So that's public, look at that. I want to share some thoughts on that from what I've received, but any input from anybody else on kind of a wrap up on how the summit went and from their perspective, what went well, what they think we can do better? Anybody?
I can't recall. I think this was there at the debriefing afterwards, but I received feedback since that it would be great if we could intentionally target planning commissions to planning commissioners to attend.
Yeah.
That was, and then also, I had, one person rave about the event and say all wonderful things. However, they always want to leave with something actionable. They want something to like take away. And so being thoughtful about what are the takeaways for people that are attending.
Yeah.
Just to, otherwise I've gotten really great.
This. But I was thoroughly impressed. I mean, amazing work. From the team, really. And yeah, I think people always want what's next. And I've been thinking about that a lot, but maybe one way to do that next time is to highlight, maybe during a wrap up, like the work that is happening. As like to let people know that there are efforts going on, there are organizations actively working, and these are maybe some contacts you can reach out to learn more about it, as opposed to creating new next. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
Because like, everyone wants next steps, and it's like there's enough to get involved in. If I know that sometimes that's how I am.
It's an interesting comment because the half a dozen people I spoke to we covered the what real well, the who real well, and the why, but not the how, like how we're gonna fix it.
Yeah,
Kind of thing. So I never thought about that. There is fixes out there just to get a little bit engaged, but the feedback I received was that and more elected officials and more planning staff.
Yeah.
Would have been great. The community's perspective.
No, I mean, I thought it was really good, a lot of different kinds of things. I think it was interesting for us, the UVA team, to meet folks from tech.
Yeah.
Who were there and like interested in what we're doing, obviously not as far ahead as we are. Issues.
I love the idea of almost spotlighting really great efforts that are happening. Because I think that's something we don't do enough, is celebrate the wins and the projects and the pipeline and the things that are going really well.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Well, it was really great too. I mean, I'm always energized by those kind of events. And so I agree that, having something to go home and do as a result Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good addition to it.
Yeah.
Although I don't know how you.
We didn't, I mean, we talked about this at the events committee, is we didn't have like a, I would call it like a closing plenary or whatever, and that would be like the space in which, you know, because we had the last sessions and then we gave people time to leave or choose to, you know, come to the partnership meeting if they wanted to, but like maybe that'd be a place where we have a small presentation about like highlighting all the work that's happening in each locality, highlighting.
And how you can engage. with-
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think dropping the board meeting after is a good idea.
Yeah.
Adding.
Yeah, I like that.
There and doing it before me, because I think by the time.
Yeah, that's tough when you're there all day.
People are fried. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody was like, okay, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wrote down, the other feedback I received, which was how to talk to the committee, the events committee.
Sure.
The networking portion in the middle was really pretty awesome. We're gonna talk about something a little bit later that kind of play off of that a little bit. But that was the other positive, but I think, I can't remember the first one. Christine, I don't think we had as much networking time as it was. I can't remember, to be honest with you.
We do, yeah. Mhm.
Because it was substantial. Some of that time was pretty good.
Oh, and also feedback the night before reception. People appreciated the opportunity to really spend some time just meeting.
Yeah.
What about the post one? Everybody.
Don't remember.
The
What
Gosh.
did Josh say? Special.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Josh, for sharing.
just, just a note for planning commissioners and, officials, I mean, I was inviting people, you know, we reached out, I was sort of cold emailing a lot of the planning commissioners, especially from, you know, rural localities I had met before. And yeah, I think next time I want to actually make an ask to the elected officials to say, like, could you engage directly with your planning commissioners? Because we really do feel like it's about, I think of the group that we missed the most, that was the biggest one, because they're obviously involved intimately in those decisions. So
Are like elected officials held that come to like a conference held in that same thing? Like, I guess it is a public meeting, right? So it's like, okay, it's more than 3 or is it
Yes.
2 to be okay?
Yes, Alvaro even had to sit and gather and call to order because they had more than.
Really?
I didn't realize that. Oh, interesting. Wow.
They asked me to come over and be a witness. That's the
Yeah.
only reason I know what happened.
Are planning commissioners held at the same standard? you think?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
technically we are.
If more than one of us, or more than 2 of us are in one meeting, we.
And discussing business.
We are sorry. We are a public body. So, anything else on the, coming back home event for wrap up? Any more thoughts? Okay. Brendan, you were a lot of work out there. What did you think? What did you see going on out there? I'd love to hear your opinion on the summit.
I sat at the reception desk.
Yeah, but what was the vibe a little bit better this
People
year?
were very happy with the way things were going. I heard nothing negative. I heard nobody complaining. The only thing they complained about was that we ran out of parking tickets.
Yeah. And then Google wouldn't open.
And they gave you, they're like, I want to leave before 3:00 and it's 5 minutes free.
Yeah.
And the gate's gonna open at 3 and we heard. It was like, I don't leave. You wait 5 minutes and you can leave in 5 minutes. So that was the only thing that I heard that was upsetting. Everyone else.
Well, we have a meeting after that, we're gonna remember that.
So that was the only negative feedback I got, but everything else was good.
Thank you, Gretchen. All right, we'll wrap that topic up and we'll go to number 7, which again is Ian. I'm assuming it's Ian. We're doing an events plan and want to learn.
I think this can be sort of combined as it's number 8. To kind of get the temperature of what you all thought, obviously this is part of what we talk about and what we will talk about at the next events committee meeting in early May. We had, part of the strategic plan is to kind of encourage these networking events, and I don't think it's necessarily able to, we're trying to have a huge summit, obviously, again in the fall, but to kind of get what y'all's thoughts were on to sort of try to engage over the next 6 months. I think that we're probably, I'm not going to speak for the committee, but I think we'll probably try and have some sort of virtual event or, something to engage the community with in the fall. I don't know to what extent, but I know that people have this a lot and they're much easier to plan than the in-person summit. And so it's a lot less staff time, but and Keith, you might want to just sort of the other networking component, you might want to just kick off the work session conversation, but
So we'll tie the two together.
Sure.
Okay, great. So just real quickly before I do that, the lunch and learns that we did during COVID were very well attended.
Yeah.
I think somewhere between 50 and 100.
Yeah.
I remember it, from my perspective, to do that. So, is Ned, can you hear us?
he says the audio is not great, but
Yeah, it's hard
I
to
can
hear you on the other end. So Ned, do you want me to jump in on this, or would you like to tag it?
I think it would be best, as it's my request that you and Ian were both here to hear me make it publicly. So why don't you shoot in, and I'm happy to answer questions as needed.
Okay, so I'm going to set this up a little bit from last Wednesday, and if I get it wrong, please correct me, and we'll take it from there. So last Wednesday, and Christine and Ian, if I start going on the topic a little bit, please bring me back in. So just a little set it up. Last Wednesday, Albemarle County Board of Supervisors had on its agenda their housing incentive, affordable housing incentive. Usually has two paths. One is for the rental, and one is for the ownership. And after much discussion, particularly from Ned at the dais, it was decided that this should really go into a work session and format, or a true work session format. And I believe the discussion was, and I believe that the decision was made that after this body to take a couple of passes at doing that. So what does that mean? What does that look like? So the work session format that Albemarle County is currently doing is more like a presentation format, right? And somebody makes a presentation, we sit at the dais, there's maybe some questions. What the vision is at the moment is to kind of do a smaller version of the summit, where we would go to, we meaning this body would be the body that goes ahead and organizes it and brings everybody together, where we would end up as a full board to talk about the housing and affordability housing incentives from the 4 pillars that we have in our public, private, nonprofits, and the people who we serve. Also bringing in and reaching out to stakeholders that are in those 4 pillars and have a kind of a real work session will be moderated, and we will hopefully come out in 1 or 2 sessions, depending on what everybody wants to do and staff can handle on it. So then we would end up with several bullet points on, this is the 6 or 12 bullet points for rental, this is the 6 or 12 bullet points for purchase, for the purchase side of it, and then either myself and Ian will do a presentation to the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors to give them that information. Did I kind of summarize that right? Christine, am I missing?
Yeah, I think it's, Albemarle County would be using the Regional Housing Partnership as one of its stakeholder groups to kind of vet through some ideas about these developer incentives and bounce ideas across people that are doing the work to see how these incentives would work in practice, and or are there things for them to consider that are not a part of their grant program that they have before the board right now.
So they've asked this body to take a couple of swings at it, to come up with it, and Ian and I had a discussion yesterday. We don't really know if it's going to be 1 sit down or 1 meeting or 2 meetings, but the goal is to take the way I'm phrasing it, this reduced version of a summit focusing on these two topics. We would maybe break it down into one meeting in the morning, an hour, or one half as an hour, and we'll have some sort of networking thing in the middle, and then have a second half of it. I think we can tackle this in 2 hours. I mean, all we're looking to do is generate some basic bullet points. I don't think we need to start writing, as I refer to it, more of a piece of policy, but just something for them to guide their conversation based on the experts in the room. And the feeling I got from sitting there was it felt like a lot of the stakeholders were not involved in the process. That's the feeling I personally got.
So are we developing from nothing, or are we reacting to what the county has already developed?
So
I mean, I'm assuming they've got something, right? They've been working on it for a long time.
They have, and Ned, please jump in, they have a particular grant program that they have designed as their incentive program. I think feedback that was heard from the board is they anticipated that being more a toolkit of incentives, lots of different choices for incentives as a package. So some might work better than others depending on the particular project. And so using this board to kind of think tank through what additional incentives might be considered. I think one of the things I talked to Supervisor Galloway about is it'd be really important to prepare the RHP in advance for that type of a work session, to know what they've done already, what types of enabling authority, so that the time spent is very valuable and not coming out of it with suggestions that potentially we don't have the enabling authority to do in the state of Virginia. So really being intentional about brainstorming with a lot of guardrails in place.
So I'll be a little bit more direct about it. The rental end of it, they have some clear paths. The purchase side, they have zero. There's really not a lot, and I'm looking at it as a nonprofit developer, but a for-profit developer. I can tell you that what was outlined and presented, we introduced 0 new homes in the county under that. So to answer your question, really, particularly on the purchase side. So what Ian, to Christine's point, when Ian and I were discussing yesterday, is that once we put a list together, we should list of who's going to then send out a request for information for each person. So it'd be, Margaret, and say, okay, affordable, what would you think the incentive would be? Bullet points like 6 or 12, none of these long things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for affordable, for rental, or for purchase, and then start deciding, putting these things together before the meeting, so that will help form the discussion at the meeting. That so we're not sitting there looking at each other. So that's the kind of concept that I'm thinking around for it. But we need some sort of guidelines or guardrails from the people that are going to attend it, right? And then maybe as we get this, the things that are common will kind of float up to it, so that we have some talking points for these common things. It also will give us enough time to engage staff to say, if the thing that's common is even legal, right, from the state's perspective, so we can kind of ask some information. But I think they're looking for somebody to help them guide or navigate this process.
And just from from a practical standpoint, in this, Christine was saying, is a tool that county elected officials and staff can use to expand and I want to say make better, but basically make more appropriate the development incentives that they're looking to implement. I think they're also looking at their affordable dwelling unit ordinance, which would require any rezoned or special use permitted projects that was over 10 units, I believe, 20% of affordable, and then take advantage of this grant package, or this, in this case, this grant package. So, it's completely, you can't put in this affordable dwelling unit ordinance because people aren't necessarily going, if they don't want to use the incentives, then they're not going to try and rezone something. But we're thinking that, like he's saying, in the next executive committee meeting can work on developing the context for this event. We could produce something to the executive committee that would be sort of who should attend in addition to regional housing partnership board members. If there's specific stakeholders, and we can definitely engage you all in that process, as well as what Keith was saying, develop some sort of pre-event thing that we send out to basically get sort of starting, even if we're starting some from scratch, but at least some ideas on the homeownership and rental side. Those sides of that coming into that meeting, and then executive committee meeting the middle one, really thinking about when this is going to happen, where, we talked about having a networking, some sort of option for food probably in the middle if we're going to have a morning and afternoon thing. So the details, but anyway, this is a new idea,
It may be a new idea, but this is what the budget was built to do. Right?
So then my point would be, it needs to be repeatable, so whatever we develop that works for Albemarle County. And County even wants to do
Yes.
that and follow the map,
Yes.
right?
Well-
So having said that, there's gotta be something who's already done it. That we can copy, you know what I mean, why start from scratch? Where did you go this past summer, you were in Washington, looking at.
But that's Washington State.
I know.
And no, that was just something very different.
I understand, I'm just saying that there are other.
Yeah, I thought.
Yeah.
We just, just run up against a lot of hurt.
Ultimately, what this would be is, the Board of Supervisors intends to have another work session on this topic, and it would just be receiving feedback from engaged stakeholders of thoughts that this group could offer for them to be prepared for their work session.
Specifically about the grant program or
Specifically about
potentially others.
Developer incentives,
Developers, I think.
In general.
as I understand it.
And I think the focus of this would be very, very limited. Obviously, like we're talking specifically about this. What Margaret's saying is that this process, we hope to, and this is sort of what we talked about in the strategic planning process, is having this be a venue where housing policy, and I think we're having fun because we've obviously positioned ourselves to receive this, but not many counties are having staff directly produce housing policy in our region. And so it's
Even Albemarle County doesn't have the resources.
right. So it's advantageous for us that we're getting, for the body, I think, to have this
Yeah.
problem or whatever. Yeah.
If you look around the table, the expertise and resources that this body has. You approach it from a homeless perspective, I may approach it from a private sector. Owen approaches it from a UVA or an educational side, Margaret from a rural perspective. On that end of it, but the 100% right, and he can figure out how to build this plan. I can tell my home county could desperately use this. Right, because they don't really know how to take this to the next step. They know they have a struggle, they just don't know how to come up with the solutions. And these are just back to the conversation we had with the summit, the how, this could be a how.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point about the strategic plan is developing. I don't want to keep using the word toolkit, but a list of resources and best practices and researching other areas that have done it and implemented these things and having case studies of what they did in order to, pass that policy. So this is like our first dip into that and trying to support something in real time so that we can learn from that process to make it replicable.
So I think what's on the table is A, do we want to do this as the RHP? And B, if we are, how, we're trying to use staff to work on that. And executive, the vice president, vice chair, and the chair on it. Doesn't sound like two logical questions.
Yeah, I think getting the municipalities sort of approval and then coming to maybe something more formal. We could talk about it.
So I don't think it's an action item.
Formal details would be presented at the next executive committee meeting, and then we could really start organizing the event.
So I will ask a logical question. This is something this body wants to do. Yes or no? Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now we have the wherewithal, the direction to move forward, and then we'll make a formal presentation at next month, but realistically. So I know that I'm pretty sure Albemarle County wants to get this before their board, long before the end of this year. So we're running out of runway here, right? So if this event was going to happen, do we have a ballpark idea when we can do it? Is it June, is it too soon, or?
I think we can do it in June,
So if that's the case, when's the next executive committee meeting?
May.
That's right. this is-
Yeah.
this is not May.
May.
Sorry. Oh, this was May.
Yeah.
Sorry. There you go. Nice job.
So. And then.
Regional Housing Partnership, the full partnership meeting is June 28th.
But does that require a full partnership? Do it? You talking about a group to do it, or you're talking about?
I'm just saying, there's also a quarterly on the calendar, June 28th.
Makes sense.
Could be.
That's not too late.
Makes sense to me.
A lot more to do.
Do you need some kind of a motion to say that we want staff and the leadership to start working on it now, or then?
I think general consensus is fine.
Yeah, I
Just
think
make sure we don't go down a path and then,
It's within our scope of work.
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine.
I just was curious if that's,
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
needed it.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Ned, you here?
Can you hear me?
Again?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sir. Is there anything you want to add to the discussion, sir?
Well, I appreciate the conversation and potentially the interest. I'll just add three things. Even had I been there in person, I would have asked Keith and Ian and Christine to discuss it. But, as Keith and I have gone around and met with the different jurisdictions, we have mentioned that the Regional Housing Partnership is a place where they can come to brainstorm, bounce ideas around. And I think this is a good opportunity for the partnership to begin that work. It just so happens that it's with Albemarle County. For the work session at the meeting last week, I mentioned the Albemarle County School Board and how they hold work sessions. When they do work sessions, they get around the table with their board members, not just staff, but they'll bring in teachers and students and parents and other bodies or organizations that exist in the community. And they get down in the weeds and work stuff out with the board members. All of the people that I would think of that you'd want around the table to have this sort of work session or conversation are members of the partnership because of how we formed the partnership. So that's why I was thinking this is the ideal place to go hash this stuff out. We were getting emails from developers. We were getting emails from not-for-profits. We were getting emails from stakeholders, advocacy groups that were out there. And this, I think the partnership provides an ideal venue to just put all those folks in one room. Those who want to be involved, great. Those that are like, well, maybe this isn't my bag of food, then I'm not interested in participating. But really just get into the nitty gritty and say, all right, what could an incentive package look like without having the constraints of one staff person, Stacy, trying to mesh it all out within the guardrails of the county government. And then I guess the third thing I would say is this isn't without precedent relative to what we see happening in the regional transit partnership and the regional work that they are doing and the studies they're doing. The micro transit one comes to mind, where the issue gets put into the appropriate subcommittee of the TJPDC, and then they do a lot of the work and help the localities work through it. So this is something that same with the NPO, working on long-range transportation planning. And one of the things they do in both those places is they say, well, what's the unconstrained list of items? Then what is the constrained list of items? And I think that a work session with the different members of our four pillars, they are saying, well, let's put it all on the table. Let's get that unconstrained list and see what the costs are. And then it'll obviously have to be constrained down or constraints put on it because we won't be able to afford everything. But that type of approach is how we do our long-range transportation planning. It's how the transit study pulled out the one that I'm thinking of. And I think housing can follow those type of
planning ideas or planning concepts to get into the brainstorm. And not only obviously would it be helping housing in Albemarle, I mean, obviously there's an interest from the county's perspective, which the full board supported in getting this feedback, but it could also be the kind of boilerplate or the example of how then other jurisdictions alone or with others can come and say, hey, maybe the partnership is a good place to be a sounding board and kind of wrestle with these ideas and then come back to work with those jurisdictions. I guess in my mind, the next step, even had things gone well last Wednesday, would have been a joint work session with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And I think the Regional Housing Partnership could lead that joint work session with those two bodies. And then it would then go through the gamut of Planning Commission and Supervisors for final approval. So those are just things that I'm adding in there. This was kind of something I offered to the rest of my board without knowing what their reaction would be last Wednesday. But they all thought it was a good idea. They all thought that the Regional Housing Partnership was the ideal place to wrestle with it. So I appreciate the support given to perhaps walking down the path a little bit on this. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody want to jump in and make a comment?
Just that we talked about this briefly earlier today was, and Keith and Christine, but we talked about whether it's possible under code sometimes. Sort of, I think this idea of the unconstrained versus constrained visions, where what we produce will actually be able to be implemented because of like or because of the code. Fascinating, and he maybe want to read it, is that what we produce and need another session after, you know, we work for the county. So what we produce could help the decision making, but won't necessarily have to be 100% vetted for legality or, you know, the context of the county that we're talking about. But you want to. Oh, or keep.
You know, Ned says this all the time in our presentations to the jurisdiction. We're not here to tell the jurisdiction what to do. We're just here to give them information. So I think, you know, Ned outlined it pretty clearly. We will do our work, come up with constrained, unconstrained, whatever bullet points we do with it, and then it's up to his body or bodies, the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, to take that information and create the final list. Is that encapsulated about what you think of that?
Yes.
Okay. You know, that we're a little bit ahead of schedule. Do we want to jump back? Did we handle the events?
Yeah.
Well enough, you think?
It's just, I don't want to get it. It's, you agree that having some sort of virtual event or series of events in the fall is a good idea. And I think, you know, from my perspective, just working with the events committee, I think that if there's an opportunity at this event or whatever this session is to have like, you know, food and have a break for people to meet within the context of a more formal work session, I still think that's accomplishing, personally, I think that's accomplishing some of the goals that we laid out in the strategic plan. And perhaps later on in the year, we can talk a bit more about some other type of in-person networking thing, but for that was appropriate personally to me, and just from what my conversations with Stacy after the event about what we sort of envisioned the events committee handling. So the answer is yes. I feel like I have a good idea of what.
So you got enough direction.
Yes.
Enough direction. Enough feedback. Is there? I think we're at the round table portion of it, and you know, either we can go through this quickly, or we can adjourn or leave whichever that's the consensus everybody wants. But if we're at the round table, does anybody want to jump in and maybe share some thoughts about this work session off the top of your head, or we'll save it for the next?
I guess I was just wondering about, it seems like it's mostly a work session instead of like a presentation. Right. So in terms of preparing for it, it's mainly maybe finding out more specifics about what the county would like feedback on. And then letting maybe some of the members who are interested to come know that so they can come prepared, but then. Okay, but there's not necessarily much more than that, right? It's not like creating an agenda per se,
I think,
maybe just a list of issues to try to.
yeah, I think if we do it and bring in and engage the folks that are gonna be coming prior to the event, we should have enough to work through. Not necessarily as a formal agenda, but maybe we will divide it into, here are the most common rental development incentives we've heard from the participants. Here are the most common homeownership, or, yeah, that kind of thing.
I think it's those two big questions.
Yeah.
It's really two questions. And then I think what Ian and I were discussing is then, send this out, like I said earlier, and say, for the rental end of it, what, based on your professional experience, your experience to other locations, what is the top 6 or 12 or whatever? The same thing on the ownership side, I'll have more to say about that personally, because that's the side of the world I focus a lot on, and what would work well from a private sector scenario or non-profit scenario. And we end up with these bullet points, and then I think that formulates quote unquote the agenda for the meeting. But it's kind of a moderated discussion, visualizing, where we have the stakeholders kind of talk about what their vision is and what they feel like. What do you feel would be the best incentive in the affordable housing from the homeless side of the equation? And it may be the same bullet points that I have online, and then they start leveling themselves out. So kind of, when we talked about this, I kind of visualize this as a large meeting where we go around and what is it called? The stickers on the wall, threats. No?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Threats on it, where we kind of through discussion and conversation, guided discussion and conversation, that we end up with these little stickers.
Who do you envision the guiding force to be?
I'm sorry.
Who do you expect that the guiding?
Well, I think that's asking me to do it.
Oh, I see.
Who's going to guide it?
The facilitator.
Yeah.
There he is.
You would be the facilitator.
He can do his chair because it's his body. So he is. I would be more than happy. Or not. Don't you want to stay? No.
That's what I would say.
No, I can't, because one of the bodies will be one I chair, which would be land trust, right? So I will end up, so I'm gonna have my vice chair from the land trust participate for that. Cool. Any other feedback? No, any other feedback or thoughts?
I don't think so at this time. I think if folks are receptive to it, I think that, again, there's some models out there that we can follow. And with some, I don't think we'll be too laborious prep. We'll be able to pull some stuff together and have good kind of review of it in May, and have a path from there and work out all the logistics. And but I don't think it's going to be too tedious of a task to pull all this together.
So then, from a reverse engineering perspective, when do you want this? When do you think you want this to go before your board and the planning commission? What month?
Well, I would have liked about 1.5 years ago, but because the topic, the incentive package topic, obviously is kind of the roadblock to getting on to other things that are in housing Albemarle. So, we already had a pathway in place for this to go to the Joint Plant Commission and supervisors. So I just want to take a step back to not delay further, and whatever is reasonable, just push ahead. So some sort of conclusion where this is back into Albemarle County's court by the fall would be great. But, we want to do it right. If we're going to pull people in, it's not just this isn't a box we're checking. This is actual in the weeds kind of work to figure out what could happen and hear from developers in the for-profit world. So, the first session might dictate whether we need a second session or not, and then, et cetera. But I mean, just hopefully or wishfully thinking, I'm hoping that it's back to the supervisors sometime in the fall for a final decision on.
Well, I think politically you would want it long before November. Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I said, I'm going to want it before November.
Yeah, our body should be able to, if the partnership could knock it out, before the, midsummer or summer is out, then it should be able to just run the gamut of the planning commission and the supervisors together. Even that section could potentially be done before the summer's out, so that in the fall it can go to the planning commission and then the supervisors and just be done before the end of the year.
We're on a round. Anybody would like to share any round table stuff, round table thinking, or would everybody be in agreement of calling it early today? Why do you want to share round table stuff? What from you?
Well, we are we reached 4 veterans experiencing homelessness. Our goal is 3.
No, there's more
To 6.
It's
It's still very close. We were probably, we were at 9, we were at 10 just last time I updated you all. So we're getting close, which is really exciting. And we're actually working with the communications team, and we have to maintain 3 for 3 months for us to officially declare that we've reached functional 0 for veterans, but it's encouraging. I actually have 3 o'clock on later, so I was wondering if can I like.
where we are in the steps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thanks, Andy.
Anything from?
No, everything's same.
Got it. Well, I'm gonna adjourn. We're gonna read it, make it like something. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.